So my name's Emmy Flowers. I'm with Faith and Hope Counseling, and of course we're part of the Pensacola Baptist Bay Association. So we're a nonprofit. We're Christian counselors with clinical focus. And so what does that mean? Well, we'll talk about that. We're licensed mental health counselors and licensed, let's see if I can get this out, and students and licensed mental health counselor interns that are registered with the state. So in counseling, you have to have 2 years, and if y'all know that, sorry, I'll just bore you for a minute. You have to have 2 years underneath someone. So we are all underneath Dr. Sharon Thompson, who teaches at Troy and is the only registered play therapist in this area and is brilliant. And so I feel very fortunate to work with her. To tell you a little bit about myself, just so we're not walking in cold, because I'm going to ask you to share. It's show and tell this week. I'm in counseling as a second, third, fourth career. I don't know where you want to go with that. I went to Auburn University and was an education major. War Eagle. We're terrible right now, but War Eagle. And I met my husband there. I grew up in Selma, Alabama, if you know where that is. I'm sure you can hear the twang. Amen. Yeah. Oh, there you go. There you go. And went to Auburn, met my husband, and he, you know, be careful what you say as a youth. I will never live anywhere smaller than Selma, Alabama, population 30,000. Moved to Bruton. Population 6 on the good day, with all the lights on. And I lived there for 25 years. So my father died of cancer when I was 18. And it's relevant because trauma. That's why we're here. And my husband died of cancer at 43. I was 41. I had an 8, 10, and 14-year-old. And so what is trauma? That's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. And so hopefully this will cooperate with me. Trauma is relative, right? I think that was a pretty significant trauma, but trauma is definitely relative. And you'll hear people talk about the big T trauma and the little t trauma. I'm going to be honest, trauma is trauma. Trauma is how you experience it. I have 3 children. They all grew up in the same household. And if you ask them what I was like as a parent, none of them would agree on that. And I traumatized them all. No, kidding, sort of. They'll have a story to tell. And so trauma is how we perceive what happens to us. I will tell you, I think that it was traumatic what I went through, both times. And I will also tell you that I cherish what happened to me because it changed my life. And I get teary when I talk about it. That's why I'm a counselor. After my husband died, I worked for the Women's Business Center out of Auburn, and then I owned a store, and now I'm a licensed mental health counselor. In the middle of that, I worked for hospice. And hospice is where I really found my passion for people, for helping people, and my purpose. And I found my purpose through my trauma. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is trauma and healing, and what that looks like. So trauma affects people in lots of different ways. And I will email y'all this. Y'all write down your email. I'll email it to you. Intrusive memories, startle response, shame and self-hatred, panic attacks, emotional overwhelm, chronic pain and headaches, and we'll talk a lot about that. Eating disorders, substance abuse, filling the void, self-destructive behaviors, little or no memories. You'll hear that a lot. Hypervigilance. Depression, disassociation, where you just completely shut down emotionally. You'll see that a lot. Loss of interest, numbing, and so of course we go back to numbing. That could be alcohol, drugs, gambling, sex, you name it, food. Decreased concentration, insomnia, hopelessness, nightmares, and flashbacks. I had a client today. Every symptom. And I'm like, of course, because you have all that trauma. And when you tell people that, there's such a sense of release. Like, oh, I'm not broken. Like there's a reason. And so I'd like to know, just because it helps me kind of distinguish where we're going, what your profession is or why you're here. So if you will share that. I told you I was going to be show and tell. I don't want to be the only one that talks.
I'm Haley Jackson. We're from Heritage in Cantonment. My husband's the pastor, so that pulled along, you know.
Okay.
But my degree is actually in social work.
Good.
I practice more with early intervention, so didn't deal with a whole lot with trauma. But, you know, as a pastor's wife, my heart hurts for the people we minister to and
Of
with.
course.
And I mean, even talking about that, my heart stirs, you know. So, I want to be able to meet their needs. I want to be able to point them in the right direction. And we've only been here a few years, so I don't know the resources as well as I'd like to, you know, that are available. So that's a lot of what kind of
Like what brought you here. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you for sharing.
Carmen Bruce, and I'm from Bellevue Baptist Church. My husband is the pastor there. We've been here about 7 years, and quite a different place than where we were from, which is Enterprise or New Brockton.
Yes, I know where that is too. They just had a death.
Yes,
sorry.
Yes, they had a very, I graduated
Yeah.
from New Brockton.
They had a child that, I think, on the football team. Yeah.
That passed away at a practice. And,
That's
yeah,
sad. I'm
also
sorry.
Enterprise, I know trauma because we were in Enterprise when we lost 8 of our students.
Wow.
In that tornado, and my husband was the chaplain in the band room that served as the morgue that night.
Wow.
When you think of trauma, he really
went through the
a
trauma.
lot, because he was in charge of cleaning up the children
Oh,
to make their pictures
yeah.
for their parents. And I guess I didn't know what that was even like, because he's always been the strong pastor, but after that night, he even had some of the post, what do you call
The
it?
PTSD.
Yes,
Which is some of this.
So I know it's real, you know. But I'm also curious today to come to this class to also maybe learn how to differentiate what is real and what is maybe not real.
Okay.
Because I think we live in a culture that is
Uses
real.
trauma a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
That's true.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Overused.
And
Yeah.
I recently listened to an interview 3 times with Abigail Shira. Are you familiar with her? With the interview between her and Al Mohler.
I don't think I've heard it, but I'll go back and
I'm
listen.
just telling you, it was one of the best things. I listened to it 3 times.
That's great.
Because she exposes a lot, and she's not even a Christian, and she exposes a lot of the other side. And you know, it was just eye-opening. So I kind of.
You're just here to hear.
I'm here to
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah. That's good. That's
I
good.
didn't talk too much.
Why? Don't. That's why we're here. I don't want to talk the whole time. You don't want to hear me. Go ahead.
My name is Heath. I'm a pastor at Hillcrest Baptist Church. I was a pastor here at this campus, and now I'm over at Nine Mile campus.
Okay.
And so I do connect ministry and biblical soul care, and so I'm here to learn what the topic is very relevant for what I do.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
I'm Dalton Smith. I am a pastor at Hillcrest also. I'm here at Spanish Trail campus. And I'm also over the Connect Ministries here, as well as First Impressions and college students.
Okay. Wonderful. So you're seeing a lot as well.
Sure.
Yeah. With college. Okay. Go ahead.
I'm Lydia Price, and I'm new here, not as pastor's wife, but because I want to be able to be equipped to help people that might experience trauma that want to move on.
Okay, great. So we all have that heart to help. And so these are hurting people. And so I have dealt with children. I'm an elementary ed. I see lots and lots and lots of teens. And it's a messed up world out there. I've got 3 boys, and then I have a stepson and a stepdaughter, and I've seen what trauma has done to them. My new husband, my late husband passed away. He lost his wife to a massive heart attack suddenly. And so both of our children, you notice I said our because we're combined now, they've been through a lot. And so I've witnessed that firsthand as far as how trauma affects. So it's a hard thing. We're seeing that in kids. Kids from tough places have a 2-year delay. The other thing that I really want to stress to all of you is that drug abuse stops the delay of your brain. So if you have a 34-year-old that comes in your doors and they're coming to you for pastoral care or just to talk, as a pastor's wife, if they started using drugs at 16 and they stopped at 30, they're 18 mentally. They stopped developing at 16 because of the drug use. And so if you really think about that, they're still like young-minded. They're still inexperienced. They're still underdeveloped. And I think it's important. And sometimes when I tell clients that, it's like, oh, that's why. And it helps. It helps. Knowledge is power. I've always believed that. Like, it helps to talk to them about the realities. You came from a traumatic home. Is it overused? Yes. But are we seeing a crisis in our culture? 100%. And what these kids are experiencing is appalling. It's horrifying. And then what I hear also from adults that they experienced, people don't see that. They see a nice, normal, perfect home. They don't see what happens behind the doors. And so we know that trauma is affecting people.
Can you say that sentence you just said about the 16, they're 18?
Yeah, so if you start using drugs and you're a regular drug user and you start at 16, you stop developing mentally until you stop. So I have a family member who started using drugs, I think, at like 14 or 15. So mentally, they stopped developing. So let's say they stopped, I said 30. Let's say they stopped at whatever, 30. They're really more like a 14 or 15-year-old when they stop, even though they're 30 years old. They stop developing mentally. And so, if you have someone that's come into your office that's kicked the drug habit, which, wow, that's amazing and hard to do. I still want you to keep in mind they stopped developing emotionally at whatever age they started the drugs. And that's really important because, number one, if they know that, then they're prepared to understand, okay, I got to take my time and develop and catch up.
Be patient with yourself.
Be patient with yourself. Give yourself grace. But they also need to understand that. Like, I think it's an important thing for them to get. Because then they know, okay, so I do need to listen to people. I do need to ask for advice. I do need to put myself around people who are doing better than I am. And it gives them hardcore facts. I have an ACEs, and I'll pass it out to you in a minute. So ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So death of a parent is an ACE. Domestic violence in your home is an ACE, adverse childhood experience. Physical, emotional, or I'm on it today. Sexual abuse. Witnessing violence in the home or community. So violence in your schools, violence, look at the news. Enough said. A family member attempting or dying by suicide. We see a lot of that, unfortunately. Growing up in a household with substance abuse or mental health issues. Either one. Parental separation, so divorce. Even just the going back and forth can be an adverse childhood experience. The fighting between the parents, all of that. A household member being in jail or prison. There's lots more. I have an adverse childhood experiences sheet that you can give to clients, especially if you're working with, say, a college group. But I think it's even helpful with adults because then it kind of spells it out. Then you get to go back and say, look. Because when you grow up in chaos, it's normal. Except it's not. It's not normal. It's trauma. So, the effects of ACEs. Social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. Adoption of health risk behaviors, acting out. What do hurting children do? I was a school teacher, I can tell you. It's not pretty. You're seeing it in your churches. You're seeing the hurting kids. They're the ones that act out. Disease, disability, and social problems. The body keeps the score. Gabor Mate. We carry our trauma in our bodies physically. Headaches. How many of you have had a bad day at work before? What do you feel like when you get home? Exhausted, tired, headaches, cranky, neck pain. Your body keeps the score. So if you have had chronic issues, your body's going to keep that. It carries it. Early death. So I know I'm so sobering. Y'all are so glad you came tonight. It gets better, I promise. So pain, emotional pain. Tell me who here has not experienced it. There are two guarantees. You're going to have some kind of emotional pain, and eventually you will die. We're getting on a great start here, right? Exciting facts. The one thing we also have in common, we survived it. What makes me so sad about suicide, and you will see that in your churches, and it can be almost contagious if it happens in a youthful population, and I hate to say the word contagious, but it can. Like, it can be viral. The thing about suicide, or it's hopelessness, is that they don't feel there's an out. It's also impulsive. It's very impulsive. And so giving people hope is saying to them, I'm here. You can come tell me. You can come talk to me. Myth about suicide, because especially if we're working with youth, and most of you are encountering them, I would say all of you are encountering them, asking someone if they are suicidal will not cause them to do anything. Not asking is where our issues are. If you are ever concerned, and I've asked, oh no, and then they'll say, well, what does that mean? So there is a difference between thinking about it and having a plan. And what I will tell you is that if they have a plan, it's a crisis. I hear a lot from parents, well, they're just looking for attention. And it scares me to death, because you have to take every threat seriously. And so I would beg you, if there's a concern about that, to have a conversation. Have a deeper conversation. Kintsugi. Kintsugi, anybody ever heard of that? I know I'm saying that wrong too. The southern slang comes out. Somebody's going to film this and be like, that girl. It's a Japanese art form. They take broken things, and they use gold, which is a beautiful, very valued possession, and they put it back together. And it's stronger, and it's more resilient, and it's considered treasured, and it's considered beautiful. We're missing it. We're missing the boat. That is what our pain does for us. I use different things when I talk to clients. Your pain has a purpose. Your mess has a message. So I'm also a grief counselor. I guess you can see why, because I've endured it in my lifetime. I worked hospice, right? Grief is hard. But a lot of times when people get to the other side, they experience this. It's valuable. We all learn things. There's a book I highly encourage if you're looking for anything in your church and you feel like there's a lot of trauma. It's called Sacred Scars, and I will pull from that tonight and give you some of the questions, because I think this is such a great book. And I'll email you all of this so you'll have it. Sacred Scars basically talks about, and I'll just read it. Many have been scarred by life's thorny path and now have an unidentifiable mark to show how God comforted them and brought them to a level place where their beauty of their scars is now greater than their pain. My life is an example of that. I'm not going to tell you that I don't grieve. Of course I do, because what? Grief is love. But I'm able to share my experience. I'll never forget, my husband died of cancer. And I called my mother. She's 93 now. Fabulous woman. Love her. And, of course, she had experienced what I experienced. And she said, what are you thinking? You're going to go do that every day after what we've been through? Yes, ma'am. But why? Why did I have that driving need? Because I didn't go through all of that pain not to help other people. And that's the truth. She doesn't remember saying this because I've mentioned it to her. But when my husband first got sick, I cried and cried because my children had to go through what I went through, grieving a sick parent. And it makes me tear up. My mother said, but that's what made you who you are. Our pain makes us who we are. I'm going to take an opportunity just for a minute because I'm curious. Is there anybody that would like to share what put you in maybe the positions you're in? Was there a painful moment? Nothing like putting you on the spot. Here's what I know. It's a great exercise to do. Go home tonight and write down the 3 biggest moments in your life. The 3 most pivotal, this made a dramatic impact on my life, and I guarantee you, take a deeper look at it. All of them will involve pain. Because pain is where we really rely on God. It's hard. And we surrender. Because when we're all doing good, oh, I'm blessed, I'm happy. I'm blessed is really one of those words, right? How blessed do you feel when you're in the middle of your pain? You have to dig deep. You have to dig deep for it. It's there, but you have to dig deep. So what does shame look like? I think this is important. Sensitivity to the opinions of others. Allowing others to take advantage of you. People pleasers, anyone? Living with the belief that you are forever rejected and inadequate. And yes, there are people in church that feel that way. We can tell them, God loves you, but we have to experience it ourselves. Losing your identity to your sin or your mistakes or your mistreatment or your pain. I am what happened to me. No. You're God's child, and you're not what happened to you. Fearing criticism or failure. Feeling unworthy of someone else's company, like I'm not good enough to be around so-and-so. And I'd love to tell you that just happens in the teenager culture, but no. These are adults. Shutting people out, because if I don't let you get to know me, then I don't have to experience your rejection. So a lot of times these people can appear almost like the bully, because I'm protecting myself. Avoiding being the center of attention. So the thing I've heard all my life, and I held this to teenagers and they rolled their eyes because that's fun. Hurting people hurt. But what is that? Hurting people hurt. They hurt others. They hurt themselves sometimes with drugs and alcohol and bad decisions because they're hurting. Our past does not define us. So Brene Brown is a shame researcher. That's all she studies. You think our topic's bad. Let's talk about shame all day and study it. I love this saying. She has a lot of them. But this saying, I really want everyone to commit the 3 things, because I see this in my counseling sessions, and I think all of you may see this in your care. If you put shame in a Petri dish, so we're experimenting now, it needs 3 ingredients to grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment. I'm going to repeat those. Secrecy, which most of the time when they come to us, all of us, they've kept it a secret. Silence, they don't want to talk about it. And judgment. And the judgment part's real important, and we'll talk about that in a minute. If you put the same amount of shame in the Petri dish and douse it with empathy, it cannot survive. And there's a huge difference between sympathy. I see you. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I fake that, by the way, but I don't with my clients. And empathy, I feel your pain. I cry for you. I hurt for you. You said it earlier. I hurt for those people. That hurts me. And I think, especially your teenagers, especially your kids, and especially your college students, they know the difference. They know it big time. So, here's the fun part. We must feel it to heal it. So, we have to feel our trauma. And what do we all want to do? We want to run away from it. We want to stuff it. We want to drink it away. We want to eat it away. We want to drug it away. We want to act it out away. But we don't want to talk about it. And you have to feel it to heal it. David Kessler he was involved with the stages of grief. He worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to create that. He's actually recently written another book, and I'll talk about that. But he says, grief demands a witness. What do witnesses do? Not judge. Grief demands a witness. They just sit with them. They just listen. They just share. They just say, tell me about that. A witness is not judging you. They're just listening. They're just showing empathy. They're loving you no matter what. Grief demands a witness. They just need someone to be with them. So what is divorce? It's grief. A death is grief, of course. What is losing your job? What is a violent household? What's a terrible childhood that they finally came clean about after all these years? What are they doing? They're grieving, and so that's what we see. We see grief of all kinds. That's what trauma is. It's a grief of what should have been. My mama should have been different. That should not have happened to me. My life should have looked different. That's grief. That's what that is. Sixth stage of grief goes a little bit deeper. That's David Kessler's newest book. There's 6 stages of grief. And let me tell you, it takes a minute to get there. Purpose. That's when you take that pain and you let it heal and you allow it to grow so that you can use it. And we see it all the time. Most people that go on to do incredible things have experienced pain. And they're using it for purpose. And that's really where our goal is. God does not waste our pain. I want to think about Job for a minute. Lost his livelihood, right? Lost his children, lost his household, lost his friends, lost his health. Body keeps the score, right? And then, what do you think Job did? It was a test. Why? Why, Lord? How many of you have ever walked in great pain and asked that question? As Christians, I don't understand. Why? I tell this story, and it's a really hard story because it's a perfect example. My husband had cancer. It was stage 4, and it spread everywhere. He lived 13 months after he got his diagnosis. And he was in his cancer treatments, and he had to go Monday through Friday for like 5 hours to take the treatments. And during that time, I hate to even say this, especially on film, but there was a guy that was a very well-known, oh, sorry, I know we're getting filmed. sex abuser for children, and he was very well-known. He had a specific look that everybody in the community knew, mainly because everybody was telling their children, including me, watch out, don't talk to him, don't, you know, he was very well-known. And he got cancer when my husband did. And in fact, they all sat around kind of like this, with all hooked up to their machines and fought over what channels to watch and shared their pain and shared their stories. And I actually loved being a part of that group because they were so inspiring. But they couldn't put him in that group. And why do you think that is? The treatments were working for him. And it was a very, very, very bitter pill for so many, including my husband. Why? Why would God let him live? And I remember saying, I don't know. I can't answer that. I know that God has a purpose for our life. I don't know. And I remember being angry. So angry. But in my husband's death, he inspired so many people. And so past the pain, I can see a purpose. In the pain, I certainly did not. And so I just caution when we talk about purpose and pain, make sure they're ready to hear it. Because in the middle of it, it's a hard thing. But as a hope giver, we do want to share that message. I don't know. And so that's when that grief demands a witness. You just sit with them. I don't know. I can't answer that. God has that knowledge, and we have to hang on to our faith. Because isn't that what Job did? After all that? But he asked the question, why? My ears have heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you, Job. Why do you think his eyes saw him? Because he had to surrender. What do we do when we surrender? We hit our knees. There is nowhere else to go. Go look at your top 3. It's interesting. Our top 3 is usually when we surrender. We learn a lot in those moments. Who are you, God? What does my suffering say? We live in such a broken world. What does our suffering say about you, God? That you're always there, that you're carrying us, that you're faithful, that you're loving. What do you want me to learn through this experience? I think that's a really valuable thing to ask when we're going through tough times. What do you want me to learn through this experience? I grew up in Selma, Alabama, and a young quarterback died after a hit, a very unusual. The community was devastated. I haven't lived in Selma since I was 18, but my own son was quarterback at T.R. Miller High School in Bruton, Alabama. And when I heard it, my heart just, as a parent, as a community member growing up in Selma, and just as someone who loves kids, and just, boom. And then I read a tribute that this young boy who was the backup quarterback had, talking about his relationship with that kid who followed Jesus, who was faithful, who was kind, who always took time out for everybody, who was a leader, who was an example. And that kid made such an impact on that young boy. And all I can think is purpose. That boy is going to pay that forward. That boy was touched. That young life was not wasted. Sorry, I'm not a technology gal. How did you work through the tragedy for your highest good? Go look at your life and say, how did I work through that? Because that's the kind of stuff you tell people. That's how you help them. It's through our stories. When I worked hospice, I hate to say I sold hospice, that sounds bad. But I did, because people have this mixed conception of what hospice is. And so my job as a marketer was to explain to people what hospice is. And I remember hearing stories sell. Personal stories sell what we want to get out there in the world. And that includes God. Our personal stories matter. It's not enough to say it. We have to live it, and we have to share it through our stories. They call that witnessing. But it's a little more personal when it's hurt, when it hurts to tell, when you tear up, when it's emotional, when it's hard. So, healing, body, mind, and spirit, faith and hope counseling. Healing perspective, body, mind, and spirit. They're all connected. We know that. If anything goes wrong, the leg's kicked out on the stool and we collapse. So if we're not right with God, we got a two-legged stool. If we're not right in our body, we have diabetes, we have thyroid condition, whatever that's untreated, the stool's messed up. And our mind is very valuable. And so when we have someone come into Faith and Hope, we're looking at a body, mind, and spirit way of looking at it. Your body is a temple. And so what do we look at? And what do I do? What do I want all of you to look at? I want you to look at their health. I want you to ask about their physical activity. No, because we're not doctors. Talk to your doctor first. But because we know the number one thing you can do against depression is what? Anybody want to take a gander? Exercise. It's as good as moderate. Moderate exercise is as good as medication for moderate depression. It's one of the first things I tell my clients, and they roll their eyes. And it helps. And you don't want to do it, by the way. Nobody wants to do it when they're depressed. Sleep. Are you sleeping? Healthy eating. If anybody hasn't invested in Daniel Amen out of Atlanta, neuroscientist, Christian, the Daniel Plan, what we eat matters. I know we know that. If God made it, it's good. You're drinking how many Diet Cokes? Which I stopped, by the way. It's really hard. All that matters. Ask them those questions. Have you talked to your doctor? Have you gotten a blood test? Have you done these things? It matters. Your mind plays a part, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Your emotions. Are you emotionally regulated? Do you know how to handle it when you're not? Your brain cognition. Are you thinking clearly? Do you have brain fog? Women, sometimes, menopause symptoms can cause problems. Social relationships. This is a fun one. Church is such a valuable tool. Social relationships. People that invest in you. And telling them, invest in others. What's the best way to make you stop feeling sorry for yourself? Give back. I told my son that the other day. He still hadn't done it. But I told him, spirit represents hope. Body, mind, spirit. A sense of belonging. A sense of love. Religion. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. It's the three-legged stool. And so when you're looking and talking to people, I want you to think about those things because they're important. That's what we do at Faith and Hope Counseling. We refer sometimes to doctors. We refer sometimes to psychiatrists, although that's not our number one thing we do. That is a place we can go. It is a clinical decision, but we try all these things first. So what can we do? This one's a big one. What can we do as just pastors, friends, neighbors, community members? Empathy. Empathy's number one. They just need to know you care. They need to know you're there. They need to know you're listening. Number two, active listening. What's the difference? Eye contact.
And sitting down instead of looking over the shoulder.
What'd you say? Active listening. Listening to understand.
Ask questions.
Clarifying questions. Reiterate. So what I heard you said was, that's what a friend of mine always jokes with me. Yeah. So what I heard you say is, yes. Because what they say is not always what we hear. Anybody have trouble with your spouse? Just saying. Summarize, validate. What does validate look like? Do you have to agree with them? I had this conversation with couples counseling a lot. If you validate them, does it mean you think they're right? just teasing you. No, of course not. She's right. Always. Always. Validating is just saying, I hear you. I'm so sorry. This works so great with teenagers. Because how many get frustrated with teenagers? Y'all are telling stories. Mine especially. And I find myself, I'm a counselor. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I think, validate. I'm so sorry. That must be really hard. Tell me more about that. Because is he going to call me again if I say, what are you doing? I'm not going to be a safe place. Of course not. Yeah. 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 That is so stupid. Oh, well, let me call Mom again because she's going to validate me. And are feelings smart? Mine aren't. Mine aren't very smart. I mean, really. So validation is just saying, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Let me think about that. Prayer. Pray with them. I pray with my clients. I pray for them. I pray before they walk in my door, and I pray when they leave. Somebody asked, and we're going to talk about this, so I'll just pause that thought. Refer to support groups or counseling. So I am the clinical advisor for Compassionate Friends. They meet every second Tuesday. I want all of you to know this information. They meet the second Tuesday at the Holy Comforter Episcopal Church. It is a non-denominational group. They are very specific. It is for parents who have lost children. Why is it important that it's that specific? Because that's such a specific pain, and they've all experienced it, and it is such a beautiful group. And I'm honored to be a part of that because that grief is so present in the room. And they feel so comfortable sharing it, and grief demands a witness. So I want you to know that if you have anyone in your churches that have lost children, and just encourage them, like, hey, just try it. There are other support groups around town. AA is a great support group. If you need ideas for support groups, let us know. I think a lot of the support group, Divorce Care, Grief Share, those are excellent programs. You have a lot of trauma, not a bad group idea either. So just thinking outside the box, the important part about trauma or grief, either one, and it wasn't a grief talk, but is support. And so groups can be really good. I think they're important. We are already accepted. So this came out of Sacred Scars. We are God's child. We're already accepted. We don't have to earn his love. There's nothing that we can do, we got to talk about shame again, that can separate us from God. He loves us. He's standing by us. He's supporting us. We walk away. He does not. And so sitting, again, not allowing it to be a secret, not allowing it to be silent and not judging, just being a safe place of compassion, of empathy, I think is so important. I think these are great questions, and I am going to email y'all these. How's your life been touched by the issue of rejection or abandonment? Do you ever feel yourself going into a new situation anticipating I'm going to be rejected? That is a trauma response because they were rejected so much as children or so much in a situation that they just automatically assume they're going to be rejected. We see that a lot in trauma clients. What have you done in the past in an effort to earn acceptance? Great college question. What does it mean to be accepted? What have I done lately outside of my moral code to try to gain acceptance? How'd that work out? Not well, usually just saying. When have you expected a rejection, but you were met with God's unconditional acceptance? Hopefully they're going to say, now, walking in to see you. But I can think of times when I anticipated something and got the opposite result. The enemy loves to try to make us believe all things we aren't. We aren't good enough. We aren't smart enough. We aren't valuable enough. We aren't loved enough. But we are already his. What to do when you're triggered. So here we are in the what to do section. How much time I got? Okay, good. Square breathing. So this is a great one for kids. This is a great one if you're in church and you can't think and you're having a triggered response. Yes, it happens. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. So, y'all do it with me. I'm such a school teacher. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Butterfly breath and Batman breath work great for kids too. 4, 5, 6. Breathing. Okay, this is the eye roll that I get. That doesn't really help. Yes, it really does. I promise you it does. It changes your breathing. Helps a lot. So I do encourage square breathing. So strong candy. Keep in your office. Peppermints. Sour candy. I started to bring some. I barely got here for this. Lemon drops, those warheads. Gummy worms if you're working with youth. Okay? It makes you stop thinking about the trauma. So if they come in unregulated, that actually is a very helpful tool. Shocking smells. So one of the things I do with some of my anxiety, we're seeing all this anxiety, right, since COVID, high anxiety. You can get these leather bands. Now they're kind of stylish. You can find them everywhere. And then you put a smell on it, like lavender or mom's perfume sometimes. I actually have put my mother's Chanel No. 5 on there. I'm sure she'd love that. Because it calms me down. It's a scent I remember from childhood. Pine, mint, whatever they want. They can wear those little leather bracelets. It doesn't make them look like they're doing anything strange, and just, okay, that works. Vagus nerve. So how many of you have ever been stressed? I got to do this. Ever done that? It's a pressure point. It actually works. I've done it unconsciously. That's very effective. Median nerve, so pitch right here. Another one that works really great, and you can do it when you're nervous and nobody really notices it. So that helps with anxiety. Tapping helps, so just tapping your feet. So this is a funny story. I just overshare, I'm sorry. I was having a stressful conversation with my husband and driving, which, I don't do well. And I was doing this because I had it on cruise control on the floorboard. That is scientific. It's bilateral stimulation. It actually can be calming. So tapping is very effective. Not going to get into all the scientific stuff, but if you're interested, either come talk to me or bilateral stimulation and just start looking it up. It can be very calming. So next time I see y'all and y'all are angry, I'm going to know. Billboard technique. I love this one. So I'm going to, who wants to volunteer? I'm not going to look at anybody. Anybody want to volunteer? It's really not hard. Thank you. So you came in, you're crying, you're unregulated, you can't calm down, you're doing the, right? Okay, Dalton, I need you to look in the corner. And I want you to imagine, corner of that room, I want you to imagine a billboard. Can you see it? Mm-hmm. What color is it? Blue. Okay, and I want you to put your phone number on that billboard. Do you see it? Mm-hmm. Read it backwards to me, please.
8, 4, 9, 1, 0, 8, 3, 0, 5, 8.
So what did we just do? I just forced him to go out of his emotional brain. Wow! It's going like, I am wired, I am crying, I can't think. And I forced him into what? Logical brain. It works like a charm. I have people with social phobia, like, I can't walk into church because somebody might talk to me. And I'll say, before you go in now, look look in the corner of your car and think about a word like hallelujah or supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I don't know, I'm kidding, but something like, and when they're panicked like that, it's hard to find a word. So, oh, there's a chair. How do I spell that backwards? Because it forces you to think, and when you're thinking that hard, you can't be super emotional. It will help them calm down. And when somebody's in your office like that, you need that. You need them to calm down. The 5 senses, we see that a lot with kids. Tell me 5 things you see. Chair. The answers are interesting. Tell me your 4 things with the 5 senses. Don't make me say them because I always mess it up. I do Billboard a lot. 5 senses works as well. And you ask them to just notice their surroundings. Takes them, again, out of that panicked anxiety mind into logical. So those are 5 immediate things you can do. Other ideas. Get out in nature. How many of you are runners? Okay, good. Do you feel better when you run? Do you think about stuff?
When I run?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Like, do you write sermons and have great ideas and solve problems?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, so that's because that's that bilateral stimulation again. One, left, right, left, right. What else does that? Walking. Walking is bilateral stimulation. It is a scientific thing. It forces your brain to use both sides, emotional and logic. And so when you hear people say, well, I just think better when I run, well, yeah, there's a reason for that. I walk every morning. Mental health, emotional health, mental health. Take breaks. How many of you get stressed at work? Anybody? Just a little bit? Okay. Taking breaks is helpful. Chair push-ups. Oh, now I'm getting fancy. So with kids, wall push-ups are great. Yeah. Chair push-ups work. Anybody need to work on their triceps? Okay. Again, just forcing them to move, forcing them to use their bodies. Talk to a trusted friend. Big deal, the word trusted. Don't ever share with the wrong people, right? You could be a trusted friend. Lunch. How many of you get hangry? Chewing gum. I used to get so mad I chewed gum in school. See, now I have a scientific reason. I know. I was that kid. Give yourself permission to be human. That's called grace. Like, we are human. We're not perfect. If we're doing the things to try to make ourselves better every day, we're going to have those moments. Okay, so let's talk about this one. Secondary trauma. The morgue story. Secondary trauma. Compassion fatigue. So we hear people that are helpers talk about being exhausted. I'm burned out. Boy, burnout's a big word, right? Secondary trauma or compassion fatigue refers to the cost of caring for others. Emotional pain. Figley defined compassion fatigue as secondary traumatic stress reaction that results from helping or wanting to help people suffering from traumatic events. Compassion fatigue is a function of bearing witness, listening, bearing witness to the suffering of others and associated with a sense of helplessness and isolation. So what can we do? I started counseling, and I'm an empath. I absorb the energy. I care. I'm in it with them. And I thought, 5 minutes? Okay. So what can we do? So another counselor told me, you can put people in a box. And so they come in, and you're in there, you tell their story, and then you put them in their locker until next time. But that didn't really work for me. It kind of did, it kind of didn't. But what did work for me was prayer. And so when they come, I have like 1 second in my brain. I just ask you, God, to allow me to be an instrument for what they need to hear. Amen. Sometimes it's that quick. And when they leave, I usually say a prayer with my client, But I also say a prayer for them, like before I put them in the box, which I know that sounds bad, but if you carry it home and you carry it around and you have 14 kids that you're seeing that all have all this stuff, what happens to you? You're worn out. So I think it's important to find something that works for you. I believe prayer has been the most effective for me, but I encourage you to figure out what works best for you, because you cannot carry their stories 24/7. What does it look like? Physical and mental exhaustion, reduced ability to empathize and sympathize with others. I've seen this with teachers. Anger, irritability, snarkiness is my word. Dreading working with certain children or adults. Oh, they're coming in the door. Ever felt that way? Heightened anxiety. Heightened anxiety. Oh, there they are. I don't want to see them at the grocery store. No, I'm kidding. I don't.
I'm just saying.
I've known.
We live across the street from the church, and I've been, after a while, we deal with a lot of community homelessness and stuff. That I told Brian one day, I said, Brian, I felt bad, but I did, because I couldn't do it.
It was compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
So you have to have time for yourself. So when we talk about compassion fatigue and what that looks like, what do you think you need to do about it? Body, mind, spirit. Let's go back to our chart. You'll get it. You'll get it by email. Take care of your body, mind, and spirit. We know what that looks like. Your brain and secondary trauma, fight, flight, or freeze. We hear about that a lot, trauma responses. We have it. Flipping your lid. Somebody says the tiniest thing, and you're like, I said I'm fine. Okay. Done it to my kids. I mean, I'm just being honest. Have y'all? You don't have to answer. Memory fog. Just, I can't think. I'm done. Scars remind us what Jesus did for us. Sacred scars. Our pain is our purpose. It's our journey. It's our stories. I want you to just go back and look. This is some questions, and I will email it, and I'll get you to write it down. It is from Sacred Scars. They're excellent questions. It's a great support group share. It has study questions in the back on the chapters. So if you have a lot of trauma in your church, I think it's a huge benefit for support groups. Questions real quick, because I talk the whole time. Faith and Hope Counseling has a lot. If you will, I'll give you an extra, but write your email down on there, and then that's your copy. That's an ACEs questionnaire. It's good to have just because it will give you an idea of what you're dealing with trauma-wise. You don't have to give it to them and say, hey, fill this out for me. You can ask them the questions without being like, here, fill out this questionnaire for me. Questions about trauma. I know that's such an uplifting topic. I have a lot of hope.
You just want to write it wherever on the page.
Yeah, just wherever. Sorry, I know I came super prepared. I have a lot of hope about trauma because I see people healing, and it is with God's grace. Faith and Hope is amazing. We have amazing counselors. I tell every person that walks in my door, look, if you don't G-haul, I know that's my word, but if you don't G-haul with me, we got other people. If you do not connect with your counselor, you will not. It won't work. So please reach out to us with questions. We do speak to churches if you need anyone. Yeah, I mean, thank y'all for sharing with me today. Yeah, hope it was helpful. I hope you learned something. Bilateral stimulation, I brought these goodies.